Phoenix is a city defined by the sun, a place where the pavement stays hot enough to burn skin long after the sun has set. Sarah, a night hiker who loved the solitude of the desert, decided to explore a trail near the base of the Superstition Mountains during a record-breaking heatwave. She noticed that as she climbed, the air didn't get cooler. It became dry and scorched, smelling like a forest fire that had been extinguished 1,000 years ago. Under the light of a blood-orange moon, Sarah saw something impossible. A flickering neon sign for a 1950s diner sitting in the middle of a barren cactus field. As she approached, the sign didn't get clearer. It shimmered like a heat mirage. When she touched the metal door of the diner, it felt like ice, despite the 110-degree night air. Inside the diner, the booths were filled with people dressed in mid-century clothes, but they weren't moving. Their skin was the color of parched earth, cracked and peeling like sun-baked clay. They weren't eating food. They were slowly pouring handfuls of fine, white desert sand into their mouths, their dry throats making a sound like sandpaper rubbing together. A man sitting at the counter turned around. His face was hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, but his hands were covered in raw, unrefined gold dust. This was a nod to the Lost Dutchman, Phoenix's most famous legend. He didn't speak, but he pointed toward a trapdoor behind the counter that led directly into the heart of the mountain, where the heat truly came from. Sarah descended the stairs and found herself in a massive cavern where a miniature, dying sun was suspended in midair by iron chains. This was the core of the valley, an ancient celestial shard that the city was built upon. The sun was pulsing, and with every pulse, a wave of heat moved through the rocks, causing the desert above to bake. In the shadows of the cavern, Sarah saw the Ashwalkers, entities made entirely of gray soot and glowing embers. They were the spirits of those who had been lost to the desert's heat over the centuries. They moved with a jerky, flickering motion, like characters in a damaged film reel, and their eyes were nothing but burning coals. The floor of the cave was covered in what looked like petrified wood, but as Sarah looked closer, she realized they were human limbs, hardened into stone by the extreme geological pressure. The mountain wasn't just made of rock. It was a graveyard of people who had tried to find the Dutchman's gold, and found a scorching eternity instead. A high-pitched, metallic shriek echoed through the cavern. It wasn't a bird, but the sound of the metal chains holding the miniature sun. The heat became so intense that Sarah's flashlight began to melt in her hand. She realized that the phoenix wasn't a bird that rose from the ashes. It was the name of the furnace that consumed the souls of the valley. The walls of the cave began to sweat, but it wasn't water, it was salt. Pure, white salt that crystallized instantly. Sarah felt a sudden, violent thirst that no water could quench. Her skin started to turn the same clay-brown color as the people in the diner, and her joints became stiff, as if they were turning into sandstone. The man in the hat appeared behind her, his voice sounding like a dust storm. He offered her a handful of gold nuggets, but as she took them, they burned through her palms. The gold was actually concentrated sunlight, a trap for the greedy. Once you touched it, you could never leave the shadow of the mountain. Sarah tried to run back to the surface, but the desert landscape had shifted. She saw the lights of downtown Phoenix in the distance, but they were upside down in the sky. The skyscrapers were melting like wax, their glass windows dripping into the sand, forming a sea of molten crystal that blocked her path. A massive hubbub dust storm roared through the cavern, but instead of sand, it was made of the ashes of forgotten memories. Sarah saw her childhood home, her parents, and her friends being torn apart by the wind, turning into gray dust. The desert was erasing her identity, preparing her to become a permanent resident of the ashes. She saw a group of hooded figures, the sun worshippers of Phoenix, standing in a circle around the dying sun. They were chanting in a language that sounded like the crackling of a bushfire. They were sacrificing the coolness of the night to ensure the sun would rise even hotter the next day, feeding the city's insatiable hunger for heat. Sarah's breath became a cloud of smoke. She sat down in a booth that had materialized in the cave, a plate of sand placed in front of her. She looked at her hands. They were now made of cracked, red earth. She was no longer a hiker. She was a landmark, a warning buried beneath the Superstition Mountains. The next morning, the local Phoenix News reported a missing hiker near the Peralta Trail. The search teams found nothing but a pair of hiking boots filled with fine gold dust and a single, perfectly preserved glass rose in the middle of the trail. In that day, the temperature in Phoenix hit a record 122 degrees, as the mountain claimed another soul to keep its sun burning.